新界北
Protection of national security is everybody's responsibility.
Tonight on Panorama, China's crackdown on Hong Kong.
We must protect our people from espionage, terrorism, political interference, subversion.
It's 25 years since Britain handed back control of the city to China. Back then, promises were made to protect fundamental freedoms. Now, Beijing is tightening its grip on those who dare to speak out.
It's a tragedy and a remorseless and vengeful attack on all the freedoms you associate with an open society.
We spend time with those who won't be silenced.
Our rights of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly is gone.
If we stay here, then we will be brainwashed.
As record numbers leave Hong Kong, what will life be like for those who remain? I've been reporting from Hong Kong since 2017, but in the last 2 years I've witnessed firsthand the dramatic transformation of this city. This is Jennifer, one of thousands who once protested against the government. Arrested with 40 others in 2019, she's now preparing for prison life.
I don't smoke. I just heard that in jail you can use these cigarettes as like currency. So I got a pack of this, and I'm trying to see if I can use these as money in jail, but I'm still not sure about that.
Jennifer maintains she was a peaceful protester, but she's been convicted of rioting. Now she's facing up to 10 years in prison.
I sincerely take it as a challenge for me. It's a challenge, but it's like in everyone's life, you definitely have some trouble that you have to overcome.
She's allowed to write to the judge to ask for leniency. What are you saying to the judge?
I'm telling him about my own story, like my personal background. 都講嚟都嘥氣咁樣，你有咩好同佢講咧？佢哋親手送咗好多人入牢獄好多年㗎啦，佢哋絕對係已經麻木咗。
Britain returned Hong Kong to China in 1997.
Now, Hong Kong people are to run Hong Kong. That is the promise, and that is the unshakable destiny.
Back then, China promised freedoms not enjoyed in the rest of the country. The way of life here was meant to be protected for 50 years. But in 2019, millions took to the streets, protesting against greater control from the Chinese government in Beijing. Opposition to their growing influence united peaceful and more radical protesters. The city was soon trapped in a cycle of violence.
The extreme use of violence and vandalism by protesters is something that we should seriously condemn, because nothing is more important than the rule of law in Hong Kong.
The young protesters saw this as their last battle for Hong Kong's freedoms. Protests sometimes turned into running battles with the police. Their mantra, if we burn, they burn with us. In 2019, Kin was an 18-year-old student.
That's me.
After a violent confrontation, he became the first protester to be shot by the police. The dramatic moment was captured by student journalists.
I was shot with a gun on the National Day of 2019. This is where the bullet came in.
Images of Kin's shooting came to symbolise the fight between protesters and the authorities. The police said they were acting in self-defence.
I feel the force used by the police was much greater than the protesters.
Released from hospital, Kin was charged with rioting and assaulting a police officer.
I feel very anxious as my trial day approaches. Even though I'm mentally prepared, when the moment comes, I might not be able to accept the reality.
Weeks after we met, Kin attempts to flee. He's seeking asylum in the US consulate. I catch the moment on my phone.
Sorry, sir. Yeah. Sorry, sir. Yeah, no photos here.
They turn him away, and I won't see him again for some time. It's June 2020. After months of unrest, Beijing imposes a wide-ranging national security law on Hong Kong. While covering the crackdown, I also get stopped by the police.
I'm a journalist. Come here. Okay. I'm investigating you. Okay.
The new law silences the protest movement. Anyone found guilty of violating it can be imprisoned for life.
The national security law, the communist law, is seeping into the whole of the legal system. Whether there's jury trials or not, whether there's open courts, whether you can get bail, they've cracked down on Hong Kong because far from being confident about their role as the next great power in the world, they're very nervous about being able to hold on to power. It's a tragedy, and it's a remorseless and vengeful attack on all the freedoms you associate with an open society.
August 2020, 200 national security officers raid Hong Kong's most popular newspaper, Apple Daily. Its owner, 74-year-old Jimmy Lai, is arrested and paraded through the newsroom. I speak to him while he's on bail.
Fear is the most inexpensive and convenient way of ruling people and controlling people.
As one of the most outspoken critics of the Chinese government, he's one of the first people to be made an example of.
At least, we uphold the spirit of freedom and human dignity, and if that prevails, we will win the war because history is on our side.
He's now in prison, awaiting trial on charges of conspiring with foreign forces to endanger national security.
Every country and territory needs national security law to protect itself. We must protect our people from espionage, terrorism, political interference, subversion. That's what every government does.
Almost every international government say that this is a draconian law. Why do they say that?
Because they are biased, because they have an ideological bias against China and Hong Kong as part of China.
At least it's better than jail in China. In Hong Kong, my family can know what happened to me.
24-year-old Jennifer is getting ready to go back to court. Convicted of rioting, she's coming to the end of a 2.5-year process.
身體健康啦嚇。
She's saying goodbye to her family. They've asked not to be filmed.
都會走返啊？拜拜。It's been a long way, and finally we can go closer to the end of this trouble. The uncertainty is the worst thing.
Scores of other young people are outside court today, many awaiting sentencing for similar charges. Some of their supporters wear symbols of the protest movement.
因為中間即係在之前啲一段好長嘅時間，即係一滴眼淚都唔會喊得出，個人就會好奇怪咯，個腦嘅狀態，想快啲完結呢件事咁樣。
Jennifer gets 3.5 years in prison. She's one of dozens sentenced today and taken to jail.
我而家拉你罪名係顛覆國家政權罪。係。
In the last 3 years, more than 10,000 people have been arrested as part of the crackdown. Nearly 3,000 of them have been prosecuted, and around 1,200 sent to prison.
After the National Security Law Act, as a independent media reporter, I will be on the target of the police.
Ronson Chan is one of the best-known journalists in Hong Kong.
即係喺國安法之後，即係呢啲嘅活動，大家都會見到嗰個紅線嗰條界線係窄咗啦。即係因為實在大家唔知條紅線喺邊啊嘛。即係任何好似同政府或者北京唔同意見嘅嘢，都會被視為違反國安法。
Ronson's been reporting from the front line since the protests began. It's made him a target.
好老實，佢當然如果從政權嚟講，佢梗係希望我更加聽話啦。咁但係我當然唔係一個聽話嘅人啦。
Ronson writes for Stand News. Since the closure of Apple Daily, it's one of the last independent news outlets left in Hong Kong. Ying Bong Lam is an editor here. He's determined to continue reporting, come what may.
We can be described as one of most influential media outlets in what you call pro-democracy camp. We do not describe ourselves like this, but maybe to the authority, they see it this way. Someday they will come to your door, and I think we would probably be one obvious target for them.
And that's exactly what happens. Hong Kong's National Security Police turn up with a court order. Stand News survives, for now. But as chairman of the Journalist Union, Ronson fears he's becoming an even bigger target. He tells me his wife is worried about his safety.
我冇特別問佢，但我都感受到可能佢會覺得，可能佢驚我有事咯。我依然有信心我係冇事，即係咯，我哋都冇犯法，冇做錯，咁因為好驚，係嘛
？I'm back in touch with Kin, who was shot by the police. He's still facing serious charges. It's been several weeks since I saw him being turned away by the US consulate. He's in bad shape.
I have nightmares, and I always wake up in a cold sweat.
He's worried about being sent to prison. The uncertainty of the new law has spread fear across this city.
This year, there have been big changes. The Hong Kong I knew as a child has totally changed. There is no more basic justice or freedom.
When I leave, Kin doesn't tell me what his plans are, and it's best I don't know.
This one is all the art materials because I like doing artwork with him. Tomorrow, the home will be empty.
Eddie and Mason are part of a mass exodus from Hong Kong. Last year, the UK government offered the right to citizenship to residents born in the territory before 1997. It angered Beijing, but tens of thousands have taken up the offer.
The situation changed quite rapidly. Many things are different. Frankly, I don't feel comfortable to speak freely. And I'm a bit worried about my children.
Even though they're leaving, Eddie's wife Mason has asked us not to show her face. She's a teacher and is worried about the government restricting what she can say in the classroom.
We have received many notice what we need to teach, what we can't teach, what we can't say. Because if we say something they didn't want to listen, then we may lose our job. If we stay here, then we will be brainwashed. I don't want my students and also my children to have this kind of education because we have the right to know the truth.
Her husband Eddie is an executive at a games company. They're giving up their comfortable life in Hong Kong for a new one in a country they've never visited. Why do you think so many Hong Kong residents are leaving the city?
Well, I think they are pretty disappointed to what happens in Hong Kong.
They leave Hong Kong, their future uncertain. More than 1% of the population, 90,000 people, have left the city since the national security law was introduced. It's the Legislative Council election. The winners will decide the future of Hong Kong. Bong has been assigned to cover it for Stan News.
My duty is to tell the public what really is going on right now in this so-called election. And at the same time, to avoid being accused of breaking the law.
In the last year, almost all pro-democracy council members have been arrested or have fled the city. China has completely overhauled the electoral system here. Now, only candidates approved by the authorities can stand, so-called patriots. They're out in force campaigning. Junius Ho is a Beijing loyalist standing for re-election.
Everybody is pro-Beijing. Everybody is pro-establishment. This isn't real diversity of opinion.
I beg to disagree. For those who run the show or participate in an election must be patriotic and love your country. Would you expect some traitor to be your leader?
Most of them know they will win the so-called election before the result is announced.
1,192 votes.
But everybody pretends like they are running a competitive election, so it's really quite surreal.
This is the moment Beijing loyalists take complete control. Ten days after the election, National Security Police arrive at Ronson Chan's home in the early hours. Ronson, the Stand News journalist, live streams it from his phone. Ronson is taken away. At the same time, the Stand News office is being raided. They confiscate cash, computers, and documents.
You can never be prepared for something like seeing your colleagues crying into tears and breaking down.
6 senior members of staff are charged with publishing seditious materials, but it's not clear what evidence the police have against them. Bong is one of the few editors who isn't arrested.
I believe I have done nothing wrong at all. If they are going to accuse me of endangering the country, okay, so be it.
Their assets seized, Stand News is forced to close. Their website is taken offline that night. The heavy-handed tactics work.
I won't comment anything right now, okay?
After a day of questioning, Ronson is released without charge.
These are the bad apples who are abusing their position. Anybody who attempts to make use of media work as a tool to pursue their political purpose or other interests contravenes the law, particularly offenses that endanger national security. They are the evil elements that damage press freedom.
The next morning, I visit Ronson at his apartment. The building security threatened to call the police when they see our camera. With his colleagues in prison, his publication closed. The pressure is too much for Ronson.
It's ridiculous.
For decades, Hong Kong has enjoyed a free press, but the national security law is reshaping this city.
I'm still worried about what will happen next. I have to keep a very high alertness because I'm afraid that if I say something wrong, that it will become another evidence to them. My body's shaking.
Deputy Leader John Lee is now going for the top job, It's the election for Hong Kong's chief executive. After leading the crackdown on the protests, he's been handpicked by Beijing. And he's the only candidate.
I hereby declare that the only candidate, Mr. John Lee Ka-chiu, is returned. Congratulations.
It really does raise questions about the extent to which a totalitarian leadership really understands what is the core, what's in the DNA of a free society.
The prime duty of every government to protect the country as a whole, the prime concern of every country or territory is survival.
It's the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square crackdown, and Bong is covering the event as an independent journalist. In 1989, hundreds, possibly thousands, died when soldiers fired on pro-democracy protesters in the capital, Beijing. Every year in Hong Kong's Victoria Park, tens of thousands hold a candlelight vigil to remember the dead. This year, the organisers have been arrested, and the police are threatening to detain anyone who attends. They're out in force. If you ever wanted to understand how much Hong Kong has changed, it's this. Plainclothes police officers confiscating candles lit in remembrance. But Hong Kong refuses to forget. Victoria Park was once a place where the dead of Tiananmen could be remembered. Not anymore.
Somebody has to stand up and show others there's still people staying here, willing to say something. The Hong Kong government shows us what we've lost, what rights Hong Kong people have lost. Freedom of speech and freedom of assembly is gone. It's totally gone. No matter what they say, no matter what the excuses are. The facts is clearly enough, clearly shown by this empty Victoria Park.
25 years since the handover, Hong Kong is becoming like any other Chinese city. The promises of its special status broken. This is more than a crackdown. This is a transformation.